Hello everyone and welcome to another feature video on the channel. This week we're looking, as you could probably tell by the title, the Group 4 problem. Now in the background is obviously going to be clips that relate to what I'm saying or just some generic TV Group 4 footage just for your enjoyment because the TV camera is pretty awesome. Now every single time a Group 4 race is brought up, whether it's a daily race or it's an FIA race, balance of performance is instantly brought up. Now, I can see the reason why it's brought up as a problem because, as I saw earlier, someone called the game RCZ Sport, and obviously in FIA there's some cars that dominate over others in certain situations. But it's understandable why balance of performance is brought up, so let's actually have a look at the actual problem, and let's see if we can bring about a solution or come up with some ideas which potentially solve the issue. So first of all, Group 4, standard knowledge here, there are 4 drivetrains. We have front-engined front-wheel drive, known as FF cars, front-engined rear-wheel drive, known as FR cars, mid-engined rear-wheel drive, known as MR cars, and then we have four-wheel drive. Obviously, all 4 wheels are driving the cars. Then we have the tyres. So obviously we have racing hard, racing medium, and racing soft. I'm excluding racing super soft because we've never ever used those in an FIA or daily race as far as I'm aware. So they're being excluded. So that's 4 drivetrains, 3 sets of tyres, and then we have 71 track layouts. I did the maths myself, I wrote every single track down, and I'm talking about circuits here. This doesn't include dirt, and it doesn't include oval layouts. This is purely circuit layouts. Unless I've got something wrong there, let me know in the comments, but we're going to use generic, I'm going to use numbers, but if they're slightly out, they're slightly out. It still explains the problem. So then on top of all of that, 4 drivetrains, 3 sets of tyres, 71 track layouts, we then have tyre wear and fuel usage. That's an awful lot of combinations. In fact, just to give you a bit of an idea, that's 4 times 3 times 71 times 2, which comes out at a staggering 1,704 combinations. One balance of performance has to cover 1,704 combinations. That's insane. That is absolutely insane. I'm not even including the count of cars here. Just that. So one balance of performance, 1,704 combinations. You can see the problem now, right? Imagine trying to balance all of that, all those cars around that situation. And trust me, these numbers exponentially increase. Is that even a word? Exponentially? Who knows? They increase massively. And then when you start adding cars, different gears, transmissions, suspension helps. Obviously that number shoots up, but we're just going to look at it in very simple terms in terms of the drivetrains. So I would argue it's impossible. In fact, I'm going to say it's impossible. But why is Group 3 better? Well, let's just look at Group 3 just for a moment. It is a Group 4 video, but let's look at Group 3 briefly. Group 3 is better because it's 2 drivetrains. That is all it is. It's FR and MR. That is it. So you literally divide the 1,704 combinations in half to 852. That's far more manageable than 1,704. Let's be honest there, which is why it's better. It's still not perfect, but it's quite obvious why it's better. Let's go back to Group 4 now and let's look at the complaints. So the first complaint that we always see, and I mentioned it already, FS are OP. I hear this all the time. But are they? Let's look at it a bit more in detail. Without tyre wear, they are one of the best cars. That is very true. No doubt about that. RCZ is currently dominating in daily races. That is a given. But when there is tyre wear, they are literally one of the worst cars to race. So what we're saying here is 852 times they are the best. 852 times they are probably one of the worst. So actually, they're the bang on average in the game. Can they be fixed? And I'd argue no. I would argue no. So here's why. Over 1 lap, an FF car has to be one of the quickest cars in the game, irrespective of tyre and fuel usage. So let me explain why. Because there is such a drop-off when there is tyres in use, let's just forget the fuel a second, just tyres, when tyre wear is in use, the drop-off is huge. The times just drop, so everyone could just overtake these cars, which is why they've put so much power into them to hopefully try and keep them as competitive as possible. But what this means is daily races are then dominated by FFs because cars can't overtake the FFs and there's no tyre wear, so they just dominate and they become the strongest car of all. Now we could look at some other complaints as well. So in the past we had the 4C GT86 being supremely better than everything the minute tyre wear is in use. Notice a common theme here, tyre wear, fuel usage. This is the problem. But they were so strong on tyres and fuel that they literally could go an extra 1 lap, 2 lap, 3 lap on the softer tyres, dominate everybody, and then just win the race. We saw that at Laguna Seca. We've even seen it at World Final, where literally, you know, there were cars on softer compounds of tyres. The Alpha was on harder compound of tyre and overtaking them. That's how dominant they were there. But without tyres and fuel, they weren't that good. Handling tracks, they were still okay and still quite good. But power tracks, they were rubbish. So BOP changed recently for them, and now they're not so strong at handling tracks, and it's become a little bit awkward with them. But obviously, that's obviously being looked at. Lots of obviously's there. Apologies for that. Right, there are other complaints as well, but we could be here for hours, so we're going to roll on now towards a little bit of a solution here, because it's alright me saying about the problems. I like to present solutions, you know this. I'm a positive person. I'm not a half glass empty, I'm a half glass full. So, well, FF cars, I think, are the predominant problem, first of all, in this category. And I would argue they need their own category. There's no way they can really be bopped in a way that daily races aren't dominated by them, but then also, you know, they can be competitive in FIA. You can certainly improve the bop, and there's obviously always going to be work going into that. But in my opinion, they'll either dominate one, or the other, or neither, and be weak in both, and then nobody picks them anyway. PD are aware of this. You know, Kaz has mentioned stuff in the past as well. And we've actually seen Daily Race A just have an FF Group 4 race. So they know about the problem. They've always said FF cars are ridiculously hard to bounce of performance. So let's give them a new category. Let's call it Group F or Group T. We'll call it F for front wheel drive, or alternatively T for touring cars. Now touring cars are predominantly FF. That gives another opportunity to get some more cars into the game, have a total new category, and have like touring car championships and such. That you can then bounce the performance of the FF cars just around themselves, and we sort of solve a problem, because instantly then we're dropping the amount of combinations by quite a lot. In fact, that combination drops down to, let me have a look, 1,278. So quickly, we're not 500 off there basically, 400, 500, whenever you want to do the maths. But what about the manufacturers series? Because obviously that's kind of a key part of GT Sport. Well, there are 4 manufacturers affected by this. There is Renault, Audi, Volkswagen and Peugeot. Let's look at Renault first, the easiest one to solve. If they move that FF car into a new group, they already have another car available to race in the manufacturers in the Megane Trophy. Happy days, job done. We're down to 3 problems now. Audi. Now Audi, there's an Audi R8 GT4 car in real life. Let's get that in the game. That's 4-wheel drive. Boom, we've got a category for it. Happy days, that can race. So then we're down to 2 manufacturers. Well, these manufacturers become a little bit more difficult, but there are still possibilities there as well. So what about Volkswagen getting a Golf R Group 4 car? They've made a Group 3 Golf. Let's make a Group 4 Golf. Obviously, Group 4 is based on standard cars, basically. There's some slight changes to the cars, and that's it. They get to race. It's not like Group 3, where loads of aero goes on. They completely change, but they just look like their road counterparts. So we could use a Golf R here. That's 4-wheel drive. Get that in. You know, happy days, job done. I think Volkswagen would be good there. They could come up with a Vision Gran Turismo car as well, potentially, if they want to do that. We haven't seen any huge GT4 VGT cars. Maybe an opportunity there. I don't know. Then we have Peugeot, and this is the tricky one. Let's be real here. Peugeot is known in France, around the world, for their front-wheel drive cars. So this is like where it gets really tricky. There's not a real amount of huge world counterparts here in terms of their manufacturer cars. They could bring back an old school car in terms of the 405. But in my opinion, I think they should go down the Vision Gran Turismo route and look at the RCZ-R, maybe turn it into an MR car. I mean, personally, just from my personal opinion, I think the RCZ should be an MR car anyway. I think it would absolutely be dominant in terms of sales. I think a lot of people would go towards the RCZ in that sense. But obviously, Peugeot are known for their front-wheel drive, which is probably why it's front-wheel drive. But even so, let's create a Vision Gran Turismo RCZ MR Group 4 car. That will probably solve it. As I say, there is the alternative of the 405. they could get that in there, and then that's all the manufacturers covered. You can still carry on with the manufacturers series. Happy days, I think, there. But okay, so let's say we get rid of the FS. Well, as I said, we get down to then 1,278 combinations. It's still not as low as Group 3, but that would obviously allow the bot to be improved somewhat, so that then different cars then become strong, and potentially we can have better races. What else could we do? Well, at the moment we've got one bop, one balance of performance. Why not turn that into two? Well, actually, let me just argue a second. There are two balance of performance in this game. I've mentioned about the circuit balance of performance, but it's actually an oval balance of performance. So why not actually turn that into 3 or 4 balance of performances? So let's just get rid of oval. So that's one of them gone. We're down to 3 balance of performances here. Let's categorize each track. Let's say we have a fast track, a handling track, and a balance track. And each track, or track layout should I say, rather than just track, is then categorized into one of these categories, okay? We have a fast, handling, balanced. If you divide 1,278 by 3, we're at 426 combinations. That is a very manageable number and very easy to bop, in my opinion. And you could just bop at one of each of those tracks, just for the Group 4 and Group 3s, if you really wanted to. Something which I personally would argue is very much boppable. Group 3, 852. Imagine if you divide that by 3, suddenly it's going to become a very, very, very competitive class of racing. I already think it's very competitive anyway. Just the odd car just needs working out here or there, but it's still pretty good anyway. But even so, that would just, oh my word, it would make it even better. Now the craziest thing to me, as I just said, it's already in the game this. They have an oval bop and they have a circuit bop. So why not divide that circuit bop just into those 3 categories? Handling, speed and balanced. And that way, I think we could have one of the best balanced performances. You may not necessarily then have to get rid of the FFs, although I would argue it's probably better in the long term because of the tyre wear issue. People don't actually realise that an FF car has to have better tyre wear than any other car in the game. It doesn't, but it needs to, in order to race. Because they accelerate, brake and turn with just their front wheels. The rear wheels do absolutely the square root of jack. Even a 4-wheel drive car can still accelerate with the rear wheels. You can't accelerate at the minute you have tyre wear in a front-wheel drive car. The drop-off is insane, and that's the problem at the moment. They need better tyre wear than everything else. And it's very hard to model that. You got to remember, they probably don't use like little numbers in the background. It'll all be involved with the physics engine. And, everything is linked to each other. And we know braking and acceleration are big parts of that. But even so, even if you literally keep FF cars in Group 4, the 1,704 combinations drops down to 568. And that does become more manageable, but as I say, I still think there's issues there. Is there anything else we could do? Well, there are other solutions, some very quick solutions, for example. You could argue that if FIA Group 4 races didn't have fuel and tyre wear, let's just say the Group 4 races are sprint races, Group 3 are more endurance races, then you could arguably bot better and you won't see dominant FF cars in daily races because they'll be balanced around the same sort of bot, an average bot and tyre wear is taken out of the equation. Obviously that divides 1,704 straight away down in half, which is quite a nice number straight off the bat, isn't it? Now in the end, obviously Gran Turismo will continuously work on this and I thank them for their efforts. As I say, looking at the numbers when I did this, I was like, wow, okay, this is insanely hard. And I try my best to be positive about situations. Like this week, Interlagos, not a good track for FFs, irrespective of the bot, because as you accelerate, the front of the car lifts up. Well, obviously that's bad for an FF car. It's also very bad out of slow corners because it just spins its wheels. Interlagos is not an FF track. It doesn't matter what you do, an FF car will be bad there. So I avoid Interlagos in an FF car. There are going to be problems and unique situations where one car will dominate at a certain track. It's just the way it is. Nobody can help that. But it does need improving in terms of FS dominated daily races and just being okay or rubbish in FIA races. But as I talk about all of this, and as I said, I thank PD for all their efforts anyway, because they do put a lot of effort into this. Like, you've no idea how much effort goes into some of this stuff. It's insane. The balance of performance in the end is a contentious subject. What do I mean by contentious? Well, if you look at Gran Turismo, or another game, or real life, everybody argues about balance of performance. Everybody. Oh, my balance of performance is off. You've heard it in Blancpain, you hear it in Gran Turismo. It's just always the same. Everybody always complains if their car's not doing very well versus other cars that are doing well. Group 4 does have a problem. We know that. And I'm hoping with time that it can be improved. So I hope you enjoyed this interesting video. I hope it shares the problem of Group 4 with the amount of actual combinations, balance, and performance has to, cross. It's absolutely nuts. It also obviously crosses into the N category there, and that even gets even worse when cars can detune and, etc. But that is the Group 4 problem. Thank you so much for listening, watching this video. Something very different once again. I want to do these feature videos more often, but that's going to be it from me now, folks. Thanks very much again. Stay safe, and I will see you in the next video or live stream.